Morning. It says on live. That's good. It's nice to be seen and nice to be live. So we've got maybe a minute before we start, but I wanted to get going so I can tell if things are going to work. It is amazing how often things do work, but we know that it's not always. So hopefully you can hear it okay and see okay. So welcome this morning. Some fun people who we love signing in. All right, so it is 9:30. So let's go ahead and begin with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So this morning, the Numbers chapter that we have is one of those old Bible stories that we heard as we were kids, probably, if you grew up in the church. And it's of Balaam. And there's like Balaam and his donkey, the talking donkey. This morning, I'm not going to really get into the donkey talking, although I always think it's odd that God opens the mouth of the donkey and Balaam doesn't seem to see that it's unusual. He's talking and arguing with a donkey that shouldn't be talking to him. Why wouldn't you listen to a donkey that was talking? And why would you threaten the donkey? He says he like if he had a sword, he'd kill the donkey right there. And the donkey's talking. Why would you kill a talking donkey? You want to do something else, figure something else out to do with the talking donkey. But he's a little different character. So, but let's go to the beginning of this chapter and take a look at what is happening here. So, chapter 22 of Numbers. Then the sons of Israel journeyed and camped in the plains of Moab, beyond the Jordan, opposite Jericho. So they are in what some commentaries I read call this is the staging grounds of Israel before they move to enter the promised land. They're getting ready to cross the Jordan. They're in that the last travels before they get to the Jordan and enter the promised land. They're opposite of Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this horde will lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time. So he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land, and they are living opposite me. Now, therefore, please come. Curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So this, all of a sudden, it seems like we are off into a side story. This is one of those stories like when Pastor Jeremy all of a sudden says, I'm going to tell you a story. I don't have enough time, and it's not in my notes. I got to tell you this story. So it seems like that kind of thing when we're starting out here. So the characters change, the point of view changes. Instead of the camera focusing on Moses and the Israelites, it backs out, and I can see it, after watching enough Lord of the Rings movies and things like that. I can see camera focused on Moses and the Israelites. All of a sudden, the camera backs out, and you can see how big this camp of the Israelites is, and it backs out up to the top of the cliff, and you can see here is Balak. He's sitting on his horse. He's brooding. He's silent. He's thinking. Suddenly, he wheels his horse around. Of course, he's riding the horse. He wheels his horse around and gives an order to his commanders that are around him. Balaam, bring Balaam to me, he says. And then he gallops off back to his castle. And you know that something's going to happen. So the first question I have, well, maybe you have a question, why are you watching all these movies like Lord of the Rings stuff? Ask me. So why this change in the story? Why suddenly are we not witnessing the what's going on in the Israeli camp, but now we're witnessing what's going on around them that they don't even know is happening? So why this change? So in order to understand that, we need to kind of understand who's writing, the author, and the purpose of the book of Numbers. So the author is Moses. And so he's writing this down. The theme or the why of this book, of the whole book of Numbers, is so that God's people can see that they need to walk by faith with God, and they need to trust Him, and they can trust Him. So when is this story written? Well, we know when it happens. It happens in that while the Israel's in that staging ground, they've just beaten up on some other kings, and Moab and Midian are afraid of them. But when was it written? So the only way how did they even figure out this story? Who told them this story? Well, later on, Balaam and Balak are captured by Moses and the Israelites, and they're both killed. And Midian is attacked and wiped out. But so somewhere in that time, someone from the enemy has spilled their guts in more than one way, and told Moses this story. So they didn't know about this story until after the fact. So this is a story of God intervening into Israel's history, and Israel and her leaders did not even know it at the time. It is something they learned later on. Sometimes that happens to us when we are going through and we come to a hard time or a dry time or even a joyful time, and we don't find out later how God was working in other people or in our lives or in what we might call circumstances, and when He is working to bring His glory and His purpose in our lives and in the lives of others. And we can only see that when we look back at it. So the purpose of Moses is writing this story down is to show future generations of Israelites that God is working even when they can't see Him working in their lives and in the history of their nation to bring about His promises. And then that causes us to need to think and to realize that God is working in our lives, in the lives of those around us, in the life of our church. Even when we can't see Him doing it, we may never see what He's done until we see Him in glory. But when we look back, we may be able to see where His hands have been working. So the other question that I have at the beginning of this story, not why did the donkey talk, but why was God angry with Balaam? So Balak sends emissaries to try and convince Balaam to come and curse Israel. Sends them 2 times. First time, Balaam listens to God and sends them away and says, God has told me I'm not to curse them. These are people that are meant for a blessing. Balak knows, or because he's king, he can't be refused, so he sends more important people to him. And Balaam says, well, I'll ask God again. And so he asks God again. And God says to Balaam in the night, if the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them. But only the word which I speak to you shall you do. So Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. Okay, so Balaam, it looks like he did what God told him he could do. So there's this one little word in there, though, that is easy for Balaam to twist, and it's easy for us to twist. So it's the word if. If the men have come to call you, rise up. So God is telling Balaam, if those leaders, if those men come back to you, then go with them. But notice that Balaam does not wait for those leaders to come back. He is set on something besides following God's orders to the letter. So he gets up in the morning, saddles his donkey, and goes off with the leaders of Moab. How many times do we miss, turn a blind eye to part of God's commands so that we can follow what we want to do? Another part of what Balaam did, and what we can't see here because English translations don't always give us the mood and the deep meaning of some of the words that are in the original. When it says, so Balaam arose and went with the leaders, there's kind of a meaning there where it was in his own head. So Balaam arose and went with them, kind of with the attitude of, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this because I want to do it. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to turn a little bit of a blind towards what God has commanded me. So God has some reason there to be upset with Balaam. Balaam has ignored one of his commands, and also Balaam's motives are not along the line of God's motives in this area. God is blessing Israel. Balaam is hoping to get honor from God and to get reward from him. So God becomes angry and sends his angel with a drawn sword. So how many times do we have in our heads an idea of what would be best for us instead of what the intention of what God has for us? Balaam, it seems like he kind of gets away with it at the end of the chapter and this story. But really he ends up on the end of the sword when the Israelites catch up with him. So for myself, what are my motives? Always asking God to check my heart. Like David, look in my heart. What does my heart say? Create in me a clean heart, so that I can follow your commands and what you are saying for me to do. Don't let me twist what you say. So today, as you go through your day, know that God is looking and that he loves you and he is. Even you can't see it. You never know, but he has your best for you. And don't twist him. And in your own head, what are your motives? What are God's motives? Right. Let's end our time with our blessing, God's blessing for us. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he cause his face to turn towards you and bring you peace. Grow in the peace of God. Thank you.